posted on October 9th, 2017 at the Cooper Point Journal, which is Evergreen's paper or journal or something. I don't think they've been able to afford an editor for a few years now, so I'm going to have to do some on-the-fly editing here. But this is from the recurring column called POC Talk, and it came out on Monday, October 9th. The relief of Brett Weinstein and Heather Heying's resignation was accompanied by the hardest of eye rolls following the news of the $500,000 settlement they will be receiving. As POC, the settlement reminds us that the damage and trauma that has been inflicted upon our community by a combination of ignorance and negligence has deep and empty pockets. Now, this author, I'm going to assume it's a female. She is speaking on behalf of all the POC at the college at this point. And it reminds us as POC, in her view as POC, that the damage and trauma that has been inflicted upon our community by a combination of ignorance and negligence has deep and empty pockets. So damage and trauma have deep and empty pockets. Normally, in POC Talk, I do not take the time to address white people, but this time, due to the cathartic nature of this letter, I am making an exception. This situation is a great learning opportunity for the capital W white community that rallied around Brett, misspelled as a good guy, quote-unquote, who, quote-unquote, isn't racist, read morally or personally bad. Something better explained by Peggy McIntosh, white feminist, white isn't capitalized there, an anti-racist activist and scholar when she says, "I was taught to see racism only in individual acts of meanness, not in invisible systems conferring dominance on my group." Brett, misspelled, is the definition of white privilege and fragility. The fear and quote-unquote danger he and his wife felt they were exposed to was only the slightest sliver of what POC deal with on an almost daily basis. She doesn't specify where, whether she's talking about Evergreen, Washington State, America, or the world. The fear they were experiencing is not unique or even new to those of us who face backlash by fact of our mere existence. None of this is to deny the legitimacy of their fear, but instead to point out the privilege there is in being able to make the decision to place yourself in a space of vulnerability by publicly expressing opinions and ideas. What? None of this is to deny to point out the privilege there is in being able to make the decision to place yourself in a space of vulnerability by publicly expressing opinions and ideas. Is that not what she's doing right now with this letter? Placing herself in a space of vulnerability by publicly expressing her opinions and ideas. This authority over the way people will treat you is what makes Brett, misspelled, and Heather the textbook definition of white fragility and privilege. This authority over the way people will treat you. This girl needs to get a college education, not just blab on the internet at a college. White fragility, a term I was recently accused of creating, is defined as a state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress becomes intolerable, triggering a range of defensive moves. These moves include the outward display of emotions, such as anger, fear, and guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and leaving the stress-inducing situation. These behaviors, in turn, function to reinstate white racial equilibrium. I wonder if she's going to unpack that, but I kind of doubt she's able to. The white, capital W, white woman and scholar who actually created the term, Robin DiAngelo, explains that this fragility arises out of a social environment that protects and insulates them, capital W, white people, from race-based stress. This insulated environment of racial protection builds white expectations for racial comfort, while at the same time lowering the ability to tolerate racial stress. Okay, instead of unpacking the first quote, she goes on to just use another quote. Let's see if she unpacks that. Brett's, misspelled Brett's, class had to be moved for fear of angry protesters interrupting it, while my class and many, many others had to be held in a park, and the school had to be evacuated for fear of being shot. White people talked about these two things as if they were equivalent. Being yelled at and being threatened with death are obviously not comparable. Obviously they're not comparable, but a colleagues of Brett put out on Facebook for people to collect his wife, which I don't know what collect means. Apparently it doesn't mean anything bad if you are the right person using it. It just can't possibly be misinterpreted as somebody snatching somebody else. Apparently. All right, let's go back. While people talked about these two things as if they were equivalent, being yelled at and being threatened with death are obviously not comparable. Obvious, that is, unless the former is being faced by a capital P privileged capital W white man and scared, not capital W white woman. Privileged, not capital white men and scared, not capital white woman have been our deaths for centuries. And this case put us in no less danger. Privileged white men and scared white privileged white men and scared white woman have been our deaths for centuries. And this case put us in no less danger. Ask my fellow students, friends, and faculty who received an onslaught of death threats. Black and brown people had to avoid campus, miss classes, leave their jobs, and in some cases even move their entire lives and families because of death threats and doxing, because of fear of being murdered, because of organized groups who would see us exterminated. Now, the cool question to ask is that why did they receive that attention? Like, they received a lot of negative attention. The whole college received a lot of negative attention. What elicited that negative attention? Was it solely, I think they want to solely pin it on Brett, but I have all these videos that everybody who watches my channel has seen that I think kind of attracted that sort of attention. Now, I'm not endorsing that sort of attention, but when you act in a certain way, you're going to rouse a certain reaction. When you act in a certain way, you're going to rouse a certain reaction. And I think that if they had this person had an inkling of self-responsibility, she would at least include that, just to be full about her opinions. Dear white liberals, let me be blatantly clear. All this is directly tied to Mr. Weinstein's TV appearances, the massive alt-right following his Thiel Capital executive brothers possesses, and the dangerous ignorance of tolerant liberalism that can see the storming of our school by alt-right groups and death threats to students, staff, and faculty as equal to a group of students yelling at a faculty member. All right, this alt-right following of his Thiel Capital executive brothers possesses. Zoltan Grossman has a theory that Eric Weinstein has through this guy named Thiel, this super-duper conservative guy Thiel, has been funding all of the negative press that Evergreen has received because of those videos. Apparently I'm on the payroll too. I haven't seen that manifested in my pocketbook though. And the dangerous ignorance of tolerant liberalism. So what's so bad about tolerant liberalism? Tolerance or liberalism? I guess they don't like the non-radical people. People who are tolerant aren't necessarily radical. They think that you need to be radical. That's the undercurrent that I'm getting, that this is a very radical and not very well thought through. It's just a regurgitated stream of invective and rhetoric that she's sponged up in her years of Evergreen education. This is classic white fragility, the inability to deal with the fact that maybe you are not the authority when it comes to issues of race, and that your personal opinion isn't only not needed, but in the long run doesn't really matter. It's laughable that he thinks he should be entitled to $500,000, much less the almost $4 million they originally attempted to get because a group of students yelled at him. Watch his interview, Brett's interview with Matthew or Matt Christensen. He goes into detail about the settlement. POC, comma, LGBTQIA+, comma, disabled and other minority groups face harassment on an almost daily basis. At Evergreen? In Washington? In America? In the world? She doesn't specify. It's horrible and it's traumatizing, but ain't nobody going to pay us $500,000 to deal with it. Our work environments are hostile. Our personal relationships are traumatic. Academia is a hotbed of racist, sexist, ableist, homophobic, transphobic garbage, and Brett, misspelled, is example number 1. Now, I don't think he's racist. He gets along pretty well with his wife, actually. He lets her correct him quite a bit. Ableist, I don't know. I guess he does have stairs at his house. I visited once. Homophobic, I don't think so. He hugs me every time we meet. And transphobic, I haven't seen him elicit that. Garbage. Academia is a hotbed of racist, sexist, ableist, homophobic, transphobic garbage. And Brett is example number 1. If she hates academia so much, I mean, maybe that explains why her writing isn't that good and her thought processes don't seem to be really showing the highest caliber of consideration. She's in a situation where she can't learn because everything around her is a hotbed of racist, sexist, ableist, homophobic, transphobic garbage. As minorities, we do not have the privilege to believe that we could be rewarded $500,000 for getting up every day to deal with white supremacy. We don't deserve subjugation, but we expect it. I don't know. I wish if she could speak to how she's being subjugated by going to school. Brett, misspelled, does not deserve $500,000, but we expect him to get it. The system works flawlessly, and the Black and brown people deserve reparations and respect, but we know we won't get it because we are not a middle-aged, college-educated, capital W, white man with the money, time, and experience to bring a lawsuit against the people who oppose us. Maybe he had the grounds, and maybe he was suing the school for it's not doing its job. He was suing the school for not providing a safe environment. Doesn't seem like she understands what the lawsuit was about. She just understands that the number's there and that he resigned, and so she's running with that, which is not good journalism. Somebody needs to tell her that. The system works flawlessly. Okay. Brett, misspelled, is the epitome of what we are fighting against. Really? Brett? Not just the neo-Nazis in the streets, but the well-meaning, highly educated freedom of speech liberals who would see us murdered in an attempt to offer tolerant speech to the hateful among us. What? Wow. Freedom of speech liberals would see people murdered in order for other people to be able to speak. I don't think that's what they want. I think there's murder and there's this thing called the First Amendment. And murder is wrong, and the First Amendment is important for some people. You don't get to murder people to enforce free speech. Of course, that's a false equivalency. But this is her narrative, and it's so disconnected from reality that it's kind of sad. That nobody in the college is, above her, that's saying, actually, let's think this through, let's talk this through, let's think about this. No, just get it out there. And I'm sure that there's no, I know for a fact that there is no white person talk or majority talk column. And we'll see if there is a counterpoint to this that is published in the paper, but I highly doubt it. Which is unfortunate because the school paper should be teaching its writers to be able to work in the workforce, not just write some communist manifesto in the Antifa vein on blog posts after you graduate, but actually receive the skills and the training to go out there and add to public discourse and give us nuanced insight into matters. And so that we can see when something negative happens, we can see the particular pinpoint negative thing that she wants to say about Brett, or the critique that she wants to make. But instead of just making this one critique, she's overloading it with all this rhetoric that obfuscates her point, if she has a point other than just being in a bad mood and doing this continual power play, which I think is a disease that is rampant right now and that we need to confront it. So Brett's the epitome of what we're fighting against. Brett, misspelled, is a reminder that even would-be or self-identified allies may be dangerous when they reclaim the power they've always had. Wow. She's kind of paranoid. Even would-be or self-identified allies may be dangerous when they reclaim the power they always had. The fact that Brett, misspelled, is in fact a not capitalized J Jewish person shows how the concept of capital W whiteness is ever changing and morphing. She's just regurgitating Robin DiAngelo, giving and taking privilege to fit its own purposes. She needs to explain that, but she's not going to, because I don't think she really understands. She just has a feeling that this works along with her narrative. Brett holds true to form when we think of how capitalism, white supremacy, and classism intertwine to keep each other standing. She doesn't go on to explain what she means by that. It's just a statement. So after almost one full year of anxiety-provoking coverage of Brett's antics, I am proud to say, wait, hold on, she said that she never talks about white people. I do not take the time to address white people, normally. But this time, okay. So after a year of this one time doing it, anxiety-provoking coverage of misspelled Brett's antics, I am proud to say, capital G, goodbye, capital G, good riddance, no capital S, so long, no capital F, farewell, capital S, see ya next never. I am 100% sure you will take your disparaging tour on the road. Isn't a tour something that goes on the road? In an attempt to not only further place students of color in danger, but to keep reveling in that sweet, sweet alt-right fame you appear to have gotten a taste for. I hope your liberal mindset was more appreciated at the Ayn Rand Institute-hosted Are We Killing Free Speech event you spoke on at the 19th. POC Talk Out. Huh. So I wish you could explain exactly how he's putting people in danger. I mean, because it's... I think he's trying to say that we're putting ourselves in danger by not allowing each other to speak, by conflating the sins of racism and with the sins of disagreement, that we're leading ourselves into a more and more dangerous situation. I'm going to take the words out of his mouth and put them back in mine and say, when we can't talk about things, that's going to lead to a mounting amount of energy that will have to be released in another way other than words. And then her last bomb that she drops is that, quote unquote, liberal. She hates liberals, but I hope your liberal mindset was more appreciated at the Ayn Rand Institute hosted event. Now, I'm not a fan of Ayn Rand. I think she's like a comic book Nietzsche. I'd rather just go to the Nietzsche. Ayn Rand is, Ayn Rand. But, I mean, he talked at a group that he doesn't necessarily align with. He went and spoke with them, right? He's exhibiting the values that he believes in, which with free speech, with disagreement, with going places where you don't align with people's values, and then you try to hash it out and talk. That last bomb that she drops kind of shows that this is such an insular place that she's gotten into that I think is being reinforced by her editors and then reinforced by the administration officially, and then reinforced by certain faculty whose talking points she mimics, as well as all this other mimicry. So it's unfortunate that this young woman, she didn't put her name on here, and I wouldn't share if she did because of this whole doxing issue. But it's unfortunate that she seems to be barely writing at a high school senior level and parsing details and stuff. It doesn't seem like she's being schooled. But maybe because, again, academia is a hotbed of racist, sexist, ableist, homophobic, transphobic garbage. There you go. That's that. This is what's going on inside Evergreen. This is the official, published thought processes of a student at the college.